Connor McDavid does Connor McDavid things as the Oilers slip past the Maple Leafs. Welcome into Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog. Free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at bodog.net. Rob Wong joined alongside by David Alter. Comes to us from Rogers Place, where the Oilers defeat the Maple Leafs 5-2. Not the best performance by the Leafs in this one, to say the least, Dave. There was maybe a tiny bit of good, but mostly bad by the Maple Leafs tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what to expect when you change up a lot of players, and I'm not saying that that's an excuse. You'll hear from players later saying that they didn't feel that that was an excuse, but, you know, I don't know if it's too many days off or whatever it was, but they looked flat. Even in that opening period, I remember the underlying analytics, like, forget the score, and I just don't remember seeing an opening period that bad. Where all four lines were under 50. Like, it was just really bad. And, yeah, don't know really what you can chalk it to. I mean, Connor McDavid, you know, the secret's out about that guy. Like, there's got to be attention paid to him. It didn't look like they were kind of on it. They kind of missed the assignment with number 97. And a lot of the main guys just didn't show up. And it resulted in a very disjointed game. You know, Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty making their debuts here. And it didn't really help that McCabe took a penalty early on, and that kind of set the tone for Edmonton to get that first goal. But yeah, this is, it's not a good start. Granted, a lot's happened in the last couple of days, and, perhaps there's some, you know, emotions and things. Like, I mean, I'm even tired from how crazy yesterday was, and I didn't play any games. So, that can wear on you for sure. Trade deadline is a couple days away, but this was just, not a good performance with how rested they should have been. They should have been coming out at least flying. And, yeah, the questions are going to start being asked. Where are the star players that are supposed to produce points? Because yeah, you are starting to become a better team defensively, but you still have to score goals, and it didn't look like anyone was there to kind of rise to that occasion.
Yeah, pretty hard to defend the Maple Leafs in this one. There's always going to be, you know, these random games where a team, for whatever reason, just doesn't show up. But because of the history and because of everything, you know, surrounding the Maple Leafs, it's hard to look at this game and not at least have it in the back of your mind. Like, you know, is this going to happen again when it comes playoff time in April? But let's hear from the man who was pulling the strings tonight. Head coach Sheldon Keefe summed it up pretty succinctly post-game.
We just didn't play with any purpose or intelligence.
How much of that can you chalk up to?
This has been such a good week for you guys, right? Like, a lot of trade, a lot of excitement. You came in here talking about how everyone was fitting in. I don't know. How do you explain that kind of a marquee matchup?
Yeah, it's just tough to get to me, our opponent tonight was very focused and very committed to play together to win the game. I thought our guys, we started fine, but just the way we started the penalty kill against the number one power play in the history of the NHL, and get our first exit and give it right back to them. Like, we're not serious about winning when that's the case, and that's nothing to do. Those are our regular penalty killers. Those are our top people. Started the game and get much better from there.
Is it particularly disappointing that there's a couple new guys and that's the impression overall? Like,
I mean, it's just disappointing. I mean, you're going to make too much, I think, of any new guys or anything like that. I thought the new guys played fine here today. It's the guys that we regularly count on that weren't good enough.
Yeah, it was not good enough by pretty much everybody on the team tonight, David. And I guess the weird part, too, is, you know, we talk all the time about these games where the Maple Leafs play inferior opponents and they play down to their competition. But generally, when they play against the top teams in the league, they tend to play well and they play up to their opponent. And I thought that was going to happen tonight. As you mentioned, you know, they have been traveling, but they haven't played since Sunday, so they've had a couple of days to rest here. I'm sure everybody's going to make the Bruce Springsteen concert jokes tomorrow on, you know, Toronto Sports Radio, that maybe the Maple Leafs had a little bit too much fun at the Boss concert. But I think that's kind of what's strange to me about this one, that, you know, they usually step up in these games against the top teams in the league. And this is not a young team. You look at the guys that they added, whether it's Ryan O'Reilly or Sam Lafferty, Jake McCabe, and, we'll get into those guys. And I'm not saying that they were at fault tonight because, in Lafferty and McCabe's case, they're coming to a new team. They have only had one practice and they're trying to get used to their new surroundings. But, there's no, 21-year-old kids on this team. It's full of vets and full of guys you think that would know better in a case like this to, as Sheldon Keefe said, playing without purpose or any sort of intelligence.
Yeah, and so that's probably the most frustrating thing for him right now because, later in that scrum, he was also asked about how, there are these kind of no-show games that happen, not necessarily who the opponent is, but these no-show performances. And that's what bothers him the most. It's not necessarily how it looks. Like he compared to watching the Boston-Calgary game from his hotel room the night before, seeing the best team in the NHL get outshot by a 3-1 margin, but having the resilience to come back and win that game like they did. And he's looking for those kind of moments, even when things kind of get tough. They don't just roll over. And at no point in this game, not even in the third when it was 5-2, you didn't really get a sense that it was enough at that point. You didn't really get enough of a sense that things are going to roll over and the Leafs are going to find the game and they were going to kind of go it. It just kind of went flat throughout. And I think that's why Sheldon Keefe is so terse in these availabilities with us afterwards, because he's at this point of the season. They've addressed a lot of these things defensively with some of these moves, and you have your star players just not being your star players. And at some point or another, once this trade deadline passes and you have to establish this defensive identity, which you did with the players that you've had, and now with new players going forward. And if you don't establish that, you don't build from that, and you don't get your guys going, they're going to be in trouble. And we didn't even get to the issue about the goaltending tonight. But they got to get them going. It's going to be a real problem if, we've kind of given some guys like Morgan Riley and Auston Matthews a bit of a pass for their performances. And, in my mind, I still don't think it matters until the playoffs, but they can't have games like this. If they have games like this, it can snowball really quickly. And so I'm curious to see the response within 24 hours against the Flames.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I guess you can say about this Leafs team is they generally are pretty resilient, and I would expect a better effort in Calgary on Thursday night. But, it is a little bit disappointing. Auston Matthews, I will say, on the level of, on the amount of things that I'm worried about, I mean, I think he's kind of low on my list because I think, come playoff time, he will be one of the more productive players on this team. But, to hear him say in practice the day before that, with all these moves, it's on the players essentially, paraphrasing, but he's basically saying like, it's on us now. Like Kyle Dubas has given us the tools and it's on us to go to work here and try to get the deal done. So to have a game immediately after that where the Leafs no-show is pretty tough to look at. But let's hear from the captain, John Tavares, who says it was definitely not a good effort.
I don't think so. I think, at this level, we all have a good understanding of what you got to bring to the table and level of execution, especially when you're playing the number one offensive team in the league and, the type of year 97's having. So, we just didn't do a good enough job, especially early, taking care of things in the neutral zone. Obviously, he got going with a power play goal, and obviously has been, hot all year, obviously, with anybody, but especially the last number of games that he's been putting the puck in the net. So, we just didn't make him more difficult, to gain entry into our zone and, earning the offense that way.
And as Tavares mentions there, Dave, I mean, everybody in the NHL has had issues slowing down Connor McDavid this year. The Maple Leafs are not alone in that. And you could just tell off the hop that he was ready to go in this one. Not sure if you caught the pregame ceremony for McDavid, but just seeing it on the TV broadcast, he had his game face. Basically, from the start of this one. He looks like that most of the time. He's not too much of a smiley-go-lucky guy when he's, competing on the ice. We do see a smile here or there, but it was pretty evident that he was not going to let the Maple Leafs come into Edmonton tonight and take it to the Oilers. So he was ready to go from puck drop tonight, and the Leafs just did not do a good enough job containing him. I mean, if you are able to slow down Connor McDavid, that makes makes life so much easier for your team. But as Tavares said, they just gave him way too much time and space to put the Leafs to bed pretty much early in this one.
Not only did I see that GIF, but it was at the time where they were showing the Molson Cup, which made me feel ridiculously old because I remember that trophy being awarded to the top Maple Leafs, like in the early and mid, and then maybe even the late 2000s. And I was like, that thing still exists? So like that to me was, kind of crazy, but all kidding aside. Yeah. Like he looked pretty intense. He was just wanting to kind of get going. I saw some comments like, oh, geez, crack a smile, whatever. Hey, whatever gets you performing that way, you cannot question it. If that's what he needs to lead the team by more than 20 points or lead the league by more than 20 points, that's what you do. And 5 straight games with at least 2 goals to become the 3rd player in 100 years to ever do that, that's insane. That's next level type of stuff. You don't see that. You really are seeing someone who is that much better than the rest. And, every star has a down year every now and then. And McDavid, last year might have been a down year for him, and Auston Matthews had a good year, and that's why he was a Hart Trophy winner, and decidedly so. But McDavid is showing that he's picked up another gear. Auston Matthews called him a freak yesterday based on what he was doing. I remember other quotes that Matthews said when describing him in previous years, saying, I quote, haven't quite figured him out yet. Like usually, he's a studying of the game and trying to and usually kind of looks on tendencies and stuff. And with McDavid, it's a puzzle. Like it's just this crazy puzzle. That's why everyone loved Ilya Mikheyev when he was a Toronto Maple Leaf, because it was so rare to see someone have the speed to catch up to Connor McDavid and lay a hit. And in that 2021 season, it was actually right here. I remember I was here for the pandemic year when Mikheyev just showed all kinds of crazy speed that he was able to catch up to Connor McDavid. And it was why Mikheyev cashed in the way he did with Vancouver. And when he was healthy, he was an effective player for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, there's a reason why Connor McDavid is what he is. And, maybe Connor Bedard might enter the chat next year and have something to say about it. But, these generational players are very hard to come by. And this is a generation upon generation, that Connor McDavid is in right now.
All right, let's move on to Jake McCabe, who made his Maple Leafs debut tonight. I thought he had a solid first shift and kind of showed, what he's going to bring to the table. He had a nice stick check in the defensive zone. Then things got a little bit rocky for him there in the rest of the period, Dave. You mentioned he took the penalty there. Had a couple of moments tonight for whatever reason, whether it was nerves or just, unfamiliarity with TJ Brody as his partner. Just a couple of passes were sort of wayward, but I thought, as the game progressed, he definitely settled in, and, you can see it that he has a lot of poise with the puck. Never gets too, rattled, I would say, in his own end if he's trying to get it out of the zone. So, a bit of a mixed bag, but I thought overall it was a nice showing for Jake McCabe to start, even though there were some, moments that didn't look too great. But let's hear from the new Maple Leafs defenseman who spoke about fitting into a new system.
Do the Leafs want their D-men to pinch down a little more and be a little bit more active than you were used to in Chicago?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. I think the forwards are a bit more responsible here getting above. So it kind of gives us the green light to go down so we know we don't have to give up on man rushes. So, it's like I said, there's different nuances throughout the systems in all 3 zones that just get used to.
Yeah, and the guy just got in yesterday and had 1 practice, so it's going to take a little bit here to figure things out, Dave, but it's still hockey at the end of the day. And first impressions are always interesting because there's always a heightened awareness when there's a new player on the team. The bad tends to feel a lot worse than it is, and the good tends to feel a lot greater than maybe it is. But what was your impression of Jake McCabe?
Yeah, the only thing that gave me concern was Luke's question there, and there's something we were talking about, which is, when you have stay-at-home physical guys, it's more of a challenge to play that structure where the Leafs do consistently bring their forwards up high, and then the defensemen are counted on to pinch a lot more. And I feel like that the way the Leafs play could be a season-long adjustment and could be maybe the only thing that not only he struggles with, but perhaps maybe even Luke Schenn struggles with a little bit as well. Eric Gustafsson, maybe not so much because he's more of an offensive minded guy. It could kind of play to his style of play. But apart from that, I think that could be a challenge. Now, I'm sure they've done their scouting. I'm sure they've done, guys can do this and figure it out. But the Leafs have never added defensemen like this mid-season, with the exception of Ilya Lyubushkin, who kind of had to do that. But he fit in pretty well with it. So there is time. I think he can kind of get it figured out. But that's my only concern, is if he can adjust to that, because he did look a little shaky off the start. But to his own admission, he was nervous. Like, this was a brand new team, brand new situation. He knows he's going to the playoffs. There's a lot of competition at D, because even though he's gifted a top 4 spot, it's not a certainty that he'll stay there. He's going to have to live up and prove to it. There's guys nipping at the heels. There's going to be guys who come in and sit out of the lineup that they've got to figure out what's the right mix here. And he's committed for another couple of years beyond this year, but they're counting on him to figure it out quickly. That's why they gave him TJ Brody, because Brody is the fixer, the guy who can make people figure it out quickly on this Toronto Maple Leafs squad.
Yeah, and it's difficult to step into a spot where your first opponent is the best player in hockey in Connor McDavid, so that doesn't make your life easier when you're trying to figure out a new system and you're trying to figure out some new teammates and a defense partner. So maybe not the best way to throw Jake McCabe in there, but like I said, there were definitely some moments I thought that he looked strong, but it's just one game, and we all understand, the circumstances that found him here today with the trade and just traveling for 24 hours. There's been a lot going on for him. Meanwhile, we did see Sam Lafferty make his Maple Leafs debut as well, coming to Toronto in that trade with the Chicago Blackhawks along with Jake McCabe, and started on the 4th line, Dave, but ended on the 3rd line with Ryan O'Reilly. So we finally saw Sheldon Keefe go to that option, and Alex Kerfoot was the other man there on the wing on that 3rd line. I thought it looked pretty good, to be honest with you. Like, I know in the 3rd period there, the Leafs are, chasing the game, and Edmonton's obviously playing back a little bit and just trying to hold the fort up a bunch of goals. But, it kind of gives you a little glimpse of, what Ryan O'Reilly might be able to do with some speedy line mates and playing against bottom 6 forward line. So I know it's just one game, but, I thought it was a nice little impression, even if it was just one.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to take the underlying statistics. Like, you kind of have to score adjust it for lack of a better way of putting it, because it is a 3rd period. Edmonton is sitting back. It was the only trio that finished above 50% for the whole game at 94.79% expected goals, but they only played 3 minutes together of 5-on-5. Sheldon Keefe confirmed that this was a mix he was going to go to at some point, but obviously the way the game was going, it just necessitated for him to do it sooner than he had hoped. He was looking for 3 or 4 game stretches here of keeping certain lines, but he teased this morning that at some point Ryan O'Reilly is going to center the 3rd line, and Tavares is going to move over to the middle. And that's exactly what happened here. And yeah, it could be a very good fit there. You have Sam Lafferty, who's got the speed to play with Ryan O'Reilly, and Alex Kerfoot, who's versatile and can kind of keep that line honest if it doesn't go right. So that's good. But then, you kind of have this Achari, Kerfoot, Aston Reese line. The mismatch to me was David Kampf, because Engvall was such a guy who made Kampf look good this season in terms of the numbers, that as soon as Engvall was gone, I was like, where's David Kampf going to settle into all this? Because it looks like this is going to be kind of difficult to figure out. And so thought it might have been okay. Couldn't believe, I didn't get a good look at the replay, but couldn't believe that goal stood, because I also thought it was offside and that it wasn't challenged. But I guess, I wasn't watching it on TV. You might have had a better look, Rob. But yeah, it's crazy. It was just absolutely crazy. That line was good. It's hard to evaluate from 3 minutes. I'm curious to see if they just kind of stick with this for the game against Calgary. But I felt that this 3rd line with Ryan O'Reilly at center is probably what they're going to do for the road games, and for the home games, maybe the overload with the top 2 lines when they have that that second line change.
Yeah, I just think it makes too much sense. And as you said, it's just a small sample size, but at least, the eye test definitely looked pretty good tonight with Ryan O'Reilly at 3C. But as far as Lafferty goes, I think he pretty much came as advertised. The guy with some speed, a guy that can get on the forecheck and, can mix it up a little bit. So I think you're just going to see that more and more and more. And it feels like over time he might become a pretty big fan favorite with the way that he plays. Meanwhile, we didn't see them tonight, of course. We're still awaiting for Eric Gustafsson and Luke Schenn to make their Maple Leafs debuts this season. Of course, Schenn back with the Maple Leafs. But, Justin Hall had a very interesting game tonight, Dave, playing alongside Morgan Rielly. That duo really struggled at times. And, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have concerns about that duo moving forward here. They just have not been that great this year for whatever reason. That mix just doesn't work for me. But Justin Hall, a couple of big hits tonight. One on Connor McDavid, one on Kyler Yamamoto, and then even got into a fight with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins after that hit on Yamamoto. But Hall was asked post-game about the additions on defense creating a bit of a logjam.
Yeah, I think there's always competition. It's a very competitive league, and the reality of the situation is if you don't play well enough, you won't be in the league for long. So that's always just kind of the deal, and we just try to take it one game at a time and perform as best you can.
So who knows if maybe Justin Hall saw those moves yesterday and this week and thought, oh boy, I might be the odd man out here. I might need to, do something to show the coaching staff that I belong in the six come playoff time. No pun intended. That was more about the six defensemen, of course. But when it comes to, the additions here of Schenn, Gustafsson, Hall, how do you think that all kind of fits here moving forward?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Justin Hall at this point is in a three-way tie with Gustafsson and Schenn for ice time at this point. Because I think Rielly, McCabe, Brody, Giordano, and maybe even to some degree Liljegren are kind of locked in 5 of the 6. And I only say that at least to start, if I were to start the playoffs in a certain way. And I only say that because they've got term behind them. So that means anyone else has to really outplay to earn that other spot, because, you don't want to risk a situation like, unless you're absolutely terrible, that a guy that you have locked in for another year kind of has to deal with, well, I kind of got pushed out and I don't know. And then it's weird at the end. So I look at Justin Hall's situation. He doesn't have a contract. He's a UFA. Rielly's locked in there. McCabe's got 2 more years. Brody's got term. Giordano's got another year. Liljegren's got another year. And then you've got Gustafsson and you've got Schenn. And both guys can play the right side. One's a natural on the right. So, they brought those guys. Eric Gustafsson has more points than anybody. You want to go offense and skill that way? Gustafsson's your guy for that spot. If you want to go shut down the human eraser, as Ryan O'Reilly referred to, then you go Luke Schenn. So Justin Hall's really in one right now to kind of stick around. And the warning was given to him when Connor Timmins got into all of these games, because they were looking to get him into a game. But as Sheldon Keefe said, don't give me a reason. And Hall gave him a reason. And when he came back into the lineup, he was a third pair guy, not a second pair guy. He's in that second pair right now, but I don't know, because that Rielly Hall defense pair does not work. I've been saying that all season long, and it was evident tonight as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, when that time comes and Luke Schenn does get into the lineup, if maybe he's the one paired with Morgan Rielly, because Schenn, of course, played a lot with Quinn Hughes in Vancouver. And I'm not saying that Morgan Rielly is Quinn Hughes or vice versa. But you would think you would want to pair him up with, that typical stay-at-home type of guy. And Schenn is that. But, that being said, do you want to play, Luke Schenn 20 minutes a night? And I'm not sure, that's really the best way to go about it either. So maybe it's a Rielly Liljegren, and then you got Giordano and Schenn as sort of a veteran duo. I mean, there's like 15 defensemen right now on the Maple Leafs, so Sheldon Keefe is going to have plenty of options to figure out. And there could be more moves too. So as we know, still a couple of days left until the trade deadline. But the Maple Leafs fall tonight 5-2 to the Edmonton Oilers. Coming up, we'll get to the Bodog line of the day. We'll also talk about the guys that did leave the team the last few days, Rasmus Sandin and Pierre Engvall, and reflect on their time. And got to get to media meal musings, of course, because this game was an ugly one. Leafs lose 5-2 to the Oilers. You're listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, free casino games and sports odds. It's time to play at bodog.net. You're listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game. It is Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. Rob Wong joined alongside by David Alter from Rogers Place. Oilers beating the Maple Leafs 5-2 in this one. Time for the Bodog line of the day. And Dave, as we've talked about a little bit already, still some time left before the Friday trade deadline at 3 p.m. And look, by all accounts here, Kyle Dubas might not be done. At least that's what a lot of the insiders seem to say. Still has some cap room to work with. We still don't know what the heck is going on with Matt Murray. And of course, with the deal with Washington, he recouped a first-round pick that might be of interest to some other teams around the NHL. If we were to set the line, I guess, if you will, for will the Maple Leafs make another move before Friday, I feel like yes would be a pretty big favorite right now, because I would be stunned if the Maple Leafs don't at least do maybe a little bit of housekeeping. I think the big swings are most likely done. That's probably going to make me look like an idiot. Feel free to clip that, Aaron. But it just does feel like there's at least one more move left to make for Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, I can't go based on what Kyle Dubas says, because he's obviously done everything different than what he's told us. And which is why I get this inkling that if there is some sort of fit for a depth goaltender, they have to make it. It's really the only thing they haven't addressed right now. As good as Samsonov has been, I think you need insurance. I don't think Matt Murray is insurance enough. I don't think Joseph Wall and Eric Källgren are enough to kind of make that leap forward. I thought Korpisalo would have been a great fit, but obviously LA had a bigger need for him. I don't think Jonathan Quick would be the solution there, nor would they want the cap hit and all the finagling and the brokering that would be required. It's going to be difficult, and maybe they don't do it, but I feel like they need to address that, because everything else has kind of been addressed. I'm okay with the amount of defensemen they need right now. You need depth in that position. Any deep playoff run shows that you need that. But what you also need is goaltenders that can steal you games. And I haven't necessarily seen that type of performance on a somewhat consistent enough basis that you just kind of feel like you need to have options. And so I don't know if like I was shocked when Sheldon Keefe said Joseph Wall is going to get that start tomorrow. I thought everything looked like it was going to be Matt Murray. And the fact that Matt Murray is on this trip and he's not ready for this game against Calgary with the deadline coming up, now you don't know what to do with that space. Like it's crazy. Like it's crazy to me. So I don't know what they do in this regard. They probably have to figure out something, but they're not getting any help with what's happening with Matt Murray's situation right now.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's going right now, and as you said, with Joseph Wall confirmed as the starter on Thursday, unless, Matt Murray wakes up and that ankle is healed and he's ready to go, it does seem like the Maple Leafs are, going to have this cap space, and, Murray's just going to be on LTIR, and, come the playoffs, they're going to make a decision whether he's ready to go, or, Joseph Wall or whatever maybe depth of goalie they get is going to be part of the mix here. But, the goaltending position is definitely one to keep an eye on with the Maple Leafs. But you look at the names out there, I mean, who do you feel great about? Like, Cam Talbot is a name that's been kind of thrown around, not linked to the Maple Leafs, but just as far as a goaltender that might be available. Korpisalo, like you mentioned, now in LA, so he's off the table. So unless there's just some name that nobody's really thought about that could be available, it's just hard to really, pinpoint where the Maple Leafs might go with, that spot. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And as you mentioned, the depth on defense, I like it. It still feels like there's too many cooks in the kitchen, but you see tonight, Timothy Liljegren goes down awkwardly. Luckily, he did come back, but it just kind of gave you a jolt and, I said to myself, like, oh, okay, yeah, it does make sense why you have, 9 defensemen right now, because any injury could happen at any point, and then you're, stuck, playing guys that maybe you don't want to have out there. So it's good to have some depth, maybe not 9 guys, but at least for now, that's what the Maple Leafs are working with. So we'll see what Kyle Dubas has left in the bag before the Friday trade deadline.
James Reimer is available.
Yeah. Oh, James Reimer. There you go.
And he was
Vesatoskala. Let's bring them all back.
James Reimer was someone that was kind of talked about before the Matt Murray option was selected by the Leafs. And, he plays on a really bad team, so you can't look at the numbers that way. And, he's been in the playoffs with the Leafs before, and he's actually stole them games. A lot of people forget about that in the 2013 series because of how it ended, but he stole game 5. It had no purpose even going to 7 games. So there you go.
Yeah, that's definitely a name. I mean, he's a UFA at the end of the year, so, it's
could be
just
cheap.
A pure rental. Could be cheap.
$2.25 million
for sure.
You could get retained. Like, you could squeeze it in easy. Anyway.
All right. Well, I was going to say, you should predict that right now and lock that in as your Friday prediction. There we go. So David Alter, don't quote him on it, but that's his prediction. James Reimer will be a Maple Leaf after the Friday trade deadline at 3 p.m. But as I mentioned before, a couple of guys out the door the last 24, 48 hours here for the Maple Leafs. Rasmus Sandin and Pierre Engvall being traded basically in a span of 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It just came down like an avalanche for the Maple Leafs on Tuesday there, Dave. But, it was a very interesting tenure, I would say, for both guys. Some ups, some downs, divisive at points, I would say, among the fan base. But when you reflect on the time in a Maple Leafs uniform for Rasmus Sandin and Pierre Engvall, what are you going to remember the most?
Look, Pierre Engvall was found money for them. To get a pick that was serviceable, late round, kind of going on PTOs and all that kind of stuff, that's found money. Like, they developed him, they made him an NHL player. And so he brings a lot of speed. I think he still would have been a Toronto Maple Leaf depth player if they didn't need to clear the cap space. That much was evident. There was just no room for everything else that they wanted to do, which is why they kind of did that. They have some other draft capital and can kind of stock the barrel that way. But Rasmus Sandin, that one was up and down. I mean, Rasmus Sandin was in this constant battle to become an everyday player with the Maple Leafs. Came in with a lot of hype. I remember in 2021, late in that season, he gets called up. They say, well, we'll see what happens. And then he's right away on PP1 over Morgan Riley. And then they move things down. He only plays 5 playoff games. The following year, he did have that knee injury, but he was practicing every day in the playoffs and it was believed that he could play. And there was some talk that, he kind of wasn't happy about the fact that he wasn't selected for the playoffs when they were making defensive changes and they took Timothy Liljegren out. And, that led to a very bitter summer in terms of what he's worth. And then he ultimately settled for what he settled for, mostly because Leafs defensemen got hurt. And then as they were building up and figuring out what they were going to do, he was going to be another one of those guys and was going to bring up the same kind of tension. So the Leafs made a decision that it was time to move on for someone who is further along in their career in Gustafsson, who can do some of the same things, even if that is for a short term, and get a first round pick out of it. I thought it was a great return, given the circumstances. But yeah, Rasmus Sandin, all kinds of potential. He fits what Washington's doing. I think he can really flourish there with Ovechkin and perhaps get some PP1 time. He's going to get a lot of ice time with the Washington Capitals.
Oh, yeah, he's going to get so much ice time there with the injuries and some of the trades that they've made. Yeah. So we wish him the best of luck. But I think you kind of hit on it there. I mean, there was a lot of promise at one point, and there still is a lot of promise for sure. I mean, he's still so incredibly young and, got to the NHL at such a young age. But I do feel, at least with this Maple Leafs team and some of the guys already under term, probably would have been difficult for him to get into the top 4. But, I also think think maybe the ceiling wasn't there that maybe the Maple Leafs thought initially when they first drafted him, because we've seen him struggle at times with strong forechecks. He's, not the biggest guy. He does play physical at times, right. But, maybe against some larger opponents, it was going to be tough for him, especially, we've seen in the past with teams like Tampa and, Boston, of course, and how heavy they can be. But as far as Pierre Engvall, for people that follow me on Twitter, everybody knows I was a big Pierre Engvall fan. As you said, a bit of a cap casualty here with the Maple Leafs trying to, add some room. But, same as kind of with Rasmus Sandin, just, always a lot of potential, but maybe never was going to live up to that potential. And as you touched on as well, I mean, he's found money for where he was drafted.
People wanted him to hit. He didn't
get to the NHL.
That was ultimately the knock on him, right? For a guy that big, he just wasn't the hitter.
Yeah, that's just not his game, unfortunately, for maybe the Maple Leafs fan base, which, sees a guy 6'5", 215. You would think maybe you would want to throw the body around just a little bit more. But, I think it's going to be interesting to see, how he fits into that Islanders team that, definitely plays a physical style, have a lot of guys there that are strong on the forecheck. So not saying that, Lou Lamoriello and company is going to be able to pry that out of Pierre Engvall by any means, but he's a useful guy. Like, I know there's a lot of people that get fed up watching him play and get really frustrated. We all get frustrated with Pierre Engvall, but he's a guy that's on pace to score 20 goals this year. Considering he doesn't get any power play time, like, that's pretty impressive. So a tough guy for the Maple Leafs to lose. I don't think they wanted to give him away by any means, but they clearly are looking for a little bit different of a flavor, let's put it that way, in the bottom six right now. All right, just got a couple of minutes left here. Of course, on the road, as always, we like to do media meal musings, and this one, I'm sure the press box meal was a lot more enjoyable than the game tonight.
The new buildings know how to get it done. Detroit's a relatively new building. Edmonton opened up around the same time Detroit did, and they get it done here. It's $20, which is pretty expensive. It's definitely among the most expensive, but as my TikTok showed, and everything in terms of the variety was a nice little buffet with tacos, meats, different salads, high quality. There was all kinds of desserts. I know I'm not really doing a great job of it. They had the Mexican street corn, which I love. That was mixed into everything. They did a really good job. Like a lot of these towns like Edmonton, Winnipeg, they're great food cities. You wouldn't expect it if you're not looking at tourist destinations and you look at those cities, but the food's pretty good. And so they pride themselves on it. And the buffet certainly hit the spot. I wasn't a fan of the price though. Inflation, I had people in the mentions kind of saying that's pretty good, but for a medium meal, it does hit the pocket when you have to hit $20. So that part sucks, but it was really high quality. I give it a solid A-.
All right, A-. I like it. Shout out to Edmonton and the food at the media meal. Like you said, some of these places, you never think of them as maybe places known for cuisine, but Rogers Place coming through with the A-. So not bad. We, of course, will reconvene on Thursday night for another Rink-Wide Toronto post-game show as the Maple Leafs continue their Alberta road trip when they face off against the Flames. So we will get yet another media meal musings and see what things are like on the other side of the province here. Just
one of the oldest buildings.
The road.
One of the oldest buildings. It's going to be worse, I can tell you already.
That's a sneak peek of how bad this grade potentially could be. But Alter setting the bar low, so who knows? Maybe they've revamped their media meal for 2023, and we'll see how the Flames do. But we're hoping the Maple Leafs can bounce back as well. Make sure to like, review, and subscribe to the pod wherever you get your favorite pods. You can follow us on Twitter, RinkWideTOR, at DAlter, and at RobWong34, and you can always get the pod at RinkWideToronto.com. For David Alter and producer Aaron, I'm Rob Wong. You've been listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds where everyone goes to play. You've been listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.